Thank you, Tim, for such a lovely introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Anna Alfonso, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at the Edmonton Public Library. In today's webinar, I'll guide you through the basics of media relations. This can take many forms, face-to-face, online, on telephone, and print. It can be both an exciting and a tad daunting task for anyone, regardless of the role you have within your library. I'll go through 10 tips to inform and support your approach to media relations. For our webinar today, we will be using this definition. Media relations involves working with media for the purpose of informing the public of an organization's mission and practices in a positive, consistent, and credible manner. Typically, this means coordinating directly with the people responsible for producing the news and features in mass media. Tip number 1, build relationships. By building relationships and rapport with reporters, producers, and bloggers, it will increase the likelihood that your library stories will be told and shared through media coverage. To build relationships, we need to understand what makes media tick. What are they interested in? Some magazines and publications like Parenting or the arts section of your daily newspaper have a clearly defined target audience and interests, while others talk to many different groups, for example, TV morning news. So it's worth finding out what type of stories they're interested in and tailor your approach accordingly. Build a media list. Prioritize the list. Who do you want to connect with? Work out which media reach your target audiences. Curate the list so that you can communicate effectively with everyone who's on it. Be a resource. One of the best ways to move beyond transactional media relations, which is you going to the media and asking, will you cover my news or can I have an interview, is to be a resource to reporters for stories that are beyond your current priorities. Invest the time to help explain to reporters covering your industry on key issues and who's who in the industry. Be available to talk to them about general library stories that may not be specific to your library. Here's what the start of a media list could look like. You can highlight the media outlet, who the person is that you're targeting, their role, interests, and the audience that this media outlet reaches. So for example, the first line is a news morning show, so this can be global and CTV. Typically, the person that you want to connect with would be the producer. And what are the interests of that segment? Family activities and events for adults. And in the audience profile, this is where you can include details about the audience that is interested in that media outlet. So in this case, they're adults 18 plus, they watch the show for 42 minutes, 80% of them are homeowners, and you can have a general idea of what their interests are. So if you know what their interests are, you can create content that's relevant to you and relevant to them. So this media list can be done in a simple spreadsheet, and if your budget allows, there are tools out there that can manage this for you, such as Meltwater and TrendKite. Tip number 2, media relations can be defined as proactive or reactive. Proactive media relations is advantageous. It's when you are actively seeking opportunities to get your library seen or heard. With proactive media relations, you define your objectives, identify an audience early, and establish the most effective ways to reach them. This includes details such as the community you'd like to engage, the tone of voice in which your library brand will speak consistently, the channels by which to communicate, and a number of specific dates on which it's essential to address your audience. As a first step, look at your marketing plan. Mark all of the points in the year when it's essential that you communicate. It may be seasonal, so summer program for kids and adults, new programs and services, the opening of a new branch or a speaker event. Consumer and trade magazines have editorial calendars. Review these calendars and see if your library has content that can be contributed. Note any relevant dates you can use as an opportunity for participation, including events where it's possible to discuss topics that are important to your customers. Perhaps you want to share the special events you're hosting for Library Month. But for many organizations, the common practice remains reactive when it comes to media relations. This is when media reach out to you to follow up on a story idea they have or on something that they have heard. Perhaps media saw a tweet about an event you are holding or a new resource that you have. If it interests them, they'll follow up with you and you'll need to organize an interview. It's important to have your spokespeople established because in this case, it's reactive and unplanned. Your go-to spokesperson may not be available, so a backup is needed. Reactive media relations is also used for negative perception management, particularly in the light of an event that has damaged the reputation of the organization. It's in these situations, when these situations present themselves, that reactive media relations is vital to limit the damage. Building relationships and being a resource has provided EPL this great opportunity on Global Morning News. On the first Friday of the month, EPLers are interviewed on content that is relevant at that point in time. This content is driven by our marketing plan. So in these examples, at the top left is our community librarian chatting about spring break before the program launched. Our fund development manager is sharing our EPL Gala news when the tickets went on sale. And our Capital City Records artist, Kaylee Cardinal, she is being interviewed about EPL's limited edition vinyl record. Tip number 3, media pitches. Be sure to customize and personalize your media pitches. Pitch individual journalists by email, phone. You can also connect through social media. The do's of media pitches. So do target your efforts. Focus and tailor your pitch to a curated list of reporters, and you have a better chance of earning media coverage. Plan and prepare. When it comes to engaging potential prospects and media in real time, all of the work doesn't happen in the moment. It requires planning. Put together monthly, quarterly, and yearly strategies that encompass media relations, campaigns, and content plans. And remember to nurture your relationships. Be aware of media's timelines and deadlines. Create a spokesperson chart so you know who the go-tos are in your library when it comes to media interviews. Perhaps it's the CEO for capital projects, anything to do with the budget, new services, and maybe it's the community librarians for new programs and classes, and then assign backup spokespeople. Here's an example of a targeted media pitch that we were successful in. So Graham Neal is an entertainment reporter for CTV Edmonton, and he typically wouldn't cover library stories, but because we were hosting Choir as part of our Forward Thinking Speaker Series, he was excited to cover it because of that entertainment angle. So look for new ways to be able to connect with media. We have a media e-newsletter that's sent out to media contacts every 3 weeks. So we use our email platform to be able to deploy this. When we're curating the content for the newsletter, we ask, is it media worthy? Is there a story in this article, and who could be interviewed? The don'ts of media pitches. Don't use cookie cutter pitches. Target your pitches to the audience. And remember, what are they interested in? Don't include heavy attachments when drafting your messages. Make sure to media outlets receive lots of pitch emails every day, and large attachments will only discourage journalists from downloading them and learning more about your pitch. You also never know what sort of regulations are placed on company email inboxes. Some don't allow attachments weighing more than 5 to 7 megs, and you wouldn't want your email turned back just because of that. And don't forget to proofread. Ensure that your pitch, media release, or media advisory is error-free. There are 2 types of formal media pitches. A media release should read like an article with quotes and facts to stimulate possible pickup by media and to generate print and broadcast reports. Whereas a media advisory offers basic information, a media release creates an image and story that journalists can use alone or use as background when writing a story. Your release should be written like an actual news story, with a headline and the most important information at the top. Your release should include quotes from spokespeople. The purpose of a media release is to announce the launch of a new program or service, a significant partnership, and opening a new branch, for example. A media release has a different purpose than a media advisory. A media advisory alerts the media in a very concise manner to an upcoming event, like a media conference. Think of it like an invitation that answers only important questions: who, what, when, where, and why. And the formats of these two pitches, a media release and a media advisory, the formats are quite different, and I'm happy to email samples of what these look like to you if you're interested. Tip number 4, what makes the news? There are 10 elements of newsworthiness. Buzzworthy stories have more than one of these elements. Proximity. If an event is happening nearby, it will impact readers more than if it were happening somewhere else that doesn't affect them as much, if it was in another city or in another province, for example. Prominence. A well-known person, place, or event has a stronger news angle than something that the audience isn't familiar with. A local guest speaker visiting your branch to take over story time doesn't resonate with many people unless that speaker is a well-known local celebrity, like a hockey player, for example, or a public figure, maybe the mayor, or Oprah. Timeliness. Current news has more impact than something that happened yesterday or last week. The news media loses interest in past events because there's always fresh news somewhere. Oddity. If something is unusual, shocking, or bizarre, the strangest alone could make it newsworthy. Consequence. If the impact of an event may directly affect the community, media will want to know about it. Conflict. Readers are always interested in disagreements, arguments, and rivalries. If an event has a conflict attached to it, many readers will be interested on that basis alone. Human interest. If a situation draws any sort of emotional reaction, then it might contain the news element of a human interest story. These stories can be soft, think of a kid at the petting zoo snapshots, or inspiring comeback accounts. Library testimonials could fall into this category. Extremes or superlatives. Reporters and audiences alike love to hear about the first, the best, the longest, the smallest, the highest. If you can claim one for yourself, go for it. Scandal. Everyone loves to hate scandals. Reporters will want to get the scoop on this. And impact. Whether it's a peaceful protest that encompasses 5 city blocks or a 10-car pileup on the Henday, the more people involved in the event, the more newsworthy it is. Tip number 5, types of media interviews. There are different types of media interviews. Print interview can be in person, phone, or Skype. Radio interview can be in studio live or telephone live or recorded. TV could be live in studio. TV could be live on location or recorded. Some use Facebook Live. Bloggers could write a blog article with or without video, and you can also be included and interviewed on a podcast. Here's a snapshot of senior marketing consultant, EPL senior marketing consultant on Global Morning doing a live TV interview. If you are on a TV morning show, look at past interviews to get a sense of what it will be like. How high are the seats? If they're too high, ensure skirts are longer. What color are the seats? Don't wear anything that clashes. Do your shoes show? Are there screens for your logo or graphic to appear? You'll need to provide these in advance to the producer. What's the interviewer's style of interviewing? Keep from wearing loud jewelry, as it may be distracting, and wear something easy for the lapel mic to clip onto. Look at the interviewer, not the camera, when you're being interviewed. Try to focus on having a conversation. As mentioned, you can also be interviewed on location at your branch or at an event. This can be live or recorded. This photo here on the screen is of a media tour led by our CEO to give media a sneak peek into the still under construction Milner Library. If you are inviting media to your location for a media event, be sure to check it out ahead of time and review what area would be best for cameras to be pointed at. Ensure that there's not a lot of clutter, that there's good lighting, and that there's room to add some sort of library sign. There'll be a lot of photos and coverage of your spokesperson being interviewed, so it'd be great to have your branding within all of those shots. In this media sneak peek example, television, radio, and print media were present, and it ended with a scrum. Ensure your spokesperson is comfortable with a media scrum. This is when the spokesperson is crowded by several media with cameras and microphones asking the spokesperson questions. You can be interviewed on radio live, in studio, or recorded by phone. Podcasts are recorded in advance, so will be edited to keep the time and can be done in person or via phone and Skype. If you are being interviewed on radio or on a podcast, find out in advance if it's a panel discussion, so it'll help you prepare your key messages. You can be interviewed for a newspaper, which will first be posted on the media outlet's website. The journalist may do interview with videographer recording, or a video journalist will do both. Even if the interview is for a traditionally print media outlet, ask in advance if a video interview will accompany it. For print media, it's accepted to ask for questions ahead of time. Almost always, reporters will end the interview asking you if there's anything else you'd like to add. This is where you can emphasize your main message. So your responsibilities for the interview. Arrive at the interview on time, so that means at least 15 minutes before the interview. Be cordial to reporters. Deliver your key message points with or without the interviewer's help. Show enthusiasm and animation at all times. Provide the TV segment producer with a list of questions you'd like to have asked in advance. TV segments are shorter, so they want to ensure that they cover your key points. So providing the questions in advance will be super helpful. Tip number 6, key messages. Before any interview, you'll need to prepare your key messages. Follow these tips to make sure your talking points are clear, effective, and memorable. Write out sentences that stand on their own. Think of what you want people to remember. As you would in any presentation, prepare your talking points by identifying your goals first. Figure out the core message you want publicized and promoted, then use it as a guide to outline the rest of your messages. Stick with something that's newsworthy and consistent with your brand. Everything you bring up during the media interview should contribute to the core message you're trying to deliver. If that's we have an exciting new service coming out soon, make sure everything you say will allow the audience to see why that's true and important for them. You could give them an overview of the service, including a short discussion of its features. Depending on the type of interview, you'll be able to elaborate on your key messages. Longer recorded interviews for print or on a podcast, for example, will give you more time to explain your key messages. Use simple words. It's we manage the program, not we oversee the management of the program. We analyze the data, not we conduct an analysis of the data. So try to use simple words when you're being interviewed and tie back to your key messages. Emphasize the positive. Convey the benefits of what you're trying to express. And avoid jargon and acronyms. Use Alberta Reader's Choice Award, not ARCA, and Young Reader's Choice Award, not YRCA. This is an example of a key message before it's been edited. Public libraries are advanced civic institutions that perform critical functions to improve communities' access and understanding of technical innovation. It's quite long, and I think some of it can be simplified, and it's a bit of a tongue twister. Here's the revised key message, easier to say and understand. Public libraries are constantly innovating to meet community needs through hands-on experiences with technology. For a media interview about an upcoming speaker presentation, your goal may be to introduce the speaker, topic of the presentation, and key dates. Here is an example of key messages that we use to announce the Neil Gaiman event. Edmonton Public Library, EPL, in partnership with the University of Alberta Libraries, present Neil Gaiman on November 13th, 2018 at the Shaw Conference Centre. Mr. Gaiman will discuss, sorry, that was key message number 1. Key message number 2, Mr. Gaiman will discuss writing and his creative process and the impacts libraries have had on his life and career. Key message number 3, EPL card holders will be able to purchase tickets to the event starting on Wednesday, September 12th at 10 a.m. on Eventbrite. Use key messages that you share with media in interviews and media releases in your advocacy documents as well. This is an advocacy booklet that we distributed to municipal candidates back in 2017, sharing EPL's impact in the community. It included our key messages and KPIs with the purpose of keeping EPL top of mind to the municipal candidates and hoping that they will continue to support the library. You can also use your key messages to respond to social media posts. Typically, when you do start garnering more media coverage and it's being shared more widely on social media, questions and comments from the public will be inevitable. So use your key messages to be able to answer those questions and comments. If the interviewer asks you a question that isn't clear or is negative, don't avoid it, as it will only be asked again. Instead, bridge the conversation to a positive aspect of the issue. This is an important factor in an interview because it allows you to control the focus and establish your message. Here are a few bridging examples. So it's important for people to know that the project is on time and on budget. What we have to look at is the community that will be served. What we have to look at is the community that will be served with these improved services. So it's important to have a few of the bridging phrases as part of your talking points as well, so you're prepared to respond accordingly. Tip number 7, brand integration. To take your key messages further, it's also important to include elements of your brand identity. Make use of adjectives or phrases that you often use to describe your brand. Innovative, freedom, create, discover, learn, idea champions, we share, gathering place, fun, customer experience. These are words and phrases that EPL uses. We try to incorporate these words and phrases when developing key messages and in EPL communications. Apple commonly uses words like innovative and next generation whenever they announce or launch a new product. As you work on your talking points, think back to your brand story and make it a prominent point throughout your interview. For recorded interviews, such as TV, podcast, radio, interviewers will look for sound bites. Think of potential sound bites in advance that reflect your key messages, and media will look for these to use in promoting the segment. Tip number 8, media kits. A media kit is a package, it can be printed or digital, that contains information about your library, event, or program. The point of the media kit is to interest a journalist to write an article or do an interview. What's in a media kit? Well, contact details include the contact details of the person who can be interviewed or the contact of the person who can coordinate the interview. A media release. Journalists will want to know what's going on and have some details about the event. Your media release should include quotes from the person who is available for the interview. Images. Make sure you put some images in your media kit that journalists can use for their stories. Most journalists require high-resolution images, but if there isn't enough space for them, use low resolution and let the journalists know that they can contact you for high-res if needed. These images can go on a USB. Testimonials from customers can also be included in your media kit. Testimonials shows the impact of your library. It brings your key messages to life. Use your best testimonials to demonstrate your credibility. Here are a couple of examples. Nima is a newcomer, single mom. Her kids learned robotics and participated in the summer reading club. Joe, the library helped him with his sobriety. He learned Photoshop, Logic Pro, and even made a song that turned into a musical piece that was used at the Hope Missions Gala. So great human interest type stories. You can also include your annual report. Share how your library is doing. Infographics are quick and easy to read. Include other interesting factoids and did you know type of facts. Did you know that customers downloaded 3.7 million e-resources in 2018? That's over 10,000 downloads a day. Did you know that 275,000 Edmontonians use their library card? Tip number 9, track media coverage. It's important to track your media coverage and measure impact of everything you do. As nonprofits with limited advertising budgets, we rely heavily on media coverage to share and distribute news and updates to the communities we serve. Here's an example of how EPL is testing the tracking of media coverage. This coverage is from the media tour that we hosted in May that gave media a sneak peek into Milner Library. The results are coming from a tool called TrendKite, a media analytics tool that we're testing. So here you can see that there were 227 shares of the media coverage on Facebook and Twitter, and a total of 35 mentions peaking on May 8th. So a mention is when a media outlet writes a story about you. So being on Gold Television is one mention. Being in Edmonton Journal is another mention, so those would be 2. So when we look at the mentions for this media event, and we had 35 and compared it to Q1, for example, of 2019, we had 41 media mentions. So they're almost equal, which tells us this was a great event for us. When you track your coverage, you'll also be privy to the media mentions surrounding your brand, and you can choose to share the coverage that you feel is most impactful to your brand. Here's another screenshot from TrendKite's dashboard. So it tells us that our total ad equivalency was over $76,000. So this calculates our earned media coverage and tells us that if we were to have purchased the coverage that we garnered from that media event, it would have cost over $76,000. And we can also see the aggregate readership for all of the media outlets that covered the story, and it's over 40 million. Tip number 10, develop an online media room. Your online media room is part of your website. An online media room is one-stop shop for library information and news. It includes the latest announcements, media releases, contact information, and media newsletters. The media room boosts credibility by sharing your media coverage, establishes support for the work you are doing, and can lead to other media coverage and stories. Use social media to share or reshare the coverage from media outlets that you feel is most aligned with your key messages and your brand. There are branding benefits because it's regularly updated. It allows your audience to know what your library is up to and what direction your brand is headed. Perhaps it's a focus on digital literacy, events featuring thought leaders, or a new partnership. Here is a snapshot of EPL's online media room. You can navigate to it from our website in the main navigation. So the media contact is front and center. So if any media wants to get a hold of us, they can easily find who to contact. Featured news includes past media releases, our e-newsletters. Past issues of our e-newsletters are also on here. So we've got a bonus tip. Our bonus tip is influencer collaboration. Influencers in social media are people who have built a reputation for their knowledge and expertise on a particular topic. They make regular posts about that topic on their preferred social media channels, typically it's Instagram, and generate engagement from enthusiastic people who pay close attention to their profiles. There are a variety of influencer types. The majority of them fit into the following categories. There's celebrities like Oprah, Reese Witherspoon with her new book club, industry experts and thought leaders like Brene Brown, bloggers and content creators like the Book Riot, and micro-influencers who could be in your office or neighborhood or on our webinar right now. The bulk of social influencer marketing today occurs in social media, mostly with micro-influencers. Micro-influencer marketing is the use of what many people would consider everyday people to promote specific products on social media. Those products can range from a book to food or a new service or a new library. One of the reasons why micro-influencer marketing has become an option is that people want advice and recommendations from other people that they trust. Audience count matters less when looking at micro-influencers than it does when looking at big name or macro influencers. There's no firm definition when it comes to the number of followers that make up a micro-influencer, but it can be from 100 to 1,000 to a few thousand. What matters most, though, is engagement. Engagement actually tends to drop the more followers an influencer has. Those with audiences smaller than 1,000 typically have engagement rates of around 15%. That means a person with 1,000 engaged fans might earn 150 likes on each post. So we've tried working with influencers. So we partnered with 3 micro-influencers for the Capilano grand opening last fall of 2018. We chose these influencers because they loved books and the library. The goal was to get a minimum of 10% of their followers engaged with our services in their Instagram stories. And since we aren't on Instagram, we thought it was a great way for us to reach that audience.
All right, that concludes the more formal portion of this presentation from Anna. Now we're going to take a couple of questions that have come in. So the first question we have is from Carla Palachuk, and she's wondering, what is a KPI?
Hi, Carla, great question. A KPI is a key performance indicator. So all of your key performance indicators that you have goals toward throughout the year. So for example, in one of the slides that I shared, you can see what our KPIs are. So the number of card registrations, the number of people who visit us, the number of customers who visit us, for example. Another key performance indicator on how many e-resources we download. It's data that tells us how we're doing.
Okay, we have another question also from Carla. Carla's wondering if, Anna, you have any suggestions for those who are in places without a communication staff, and is there one thing that they should focus on?
I think that the one thing would be the planning part, Carla. So looking at your year, you know that there are programs and events sprinkled throughout the year that you're definitely going to do. So focus on those campaigns and programs and what your approach to media would be. So if it's the summer reading club, for example, and it starts in June, I would start planning in early May at the latest to talk about how you're going to approach the media. And I provided 2 examples of official media pitches, but for some media, it's more about building the relationship, and you can pick up the phone or send them a quick email, just even to talk about what those opportunities look like. But if it was one thing, I would stick with the planning and then figuring out what media work with your programs, with your plan.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anna. Those were some great questions. Those are the only questions we have come through right now. So we're going to hang out for a couple more minutes. If you have any other questions for Anna, please feel free to send them through either the chat or the questions function. And I'll keep an eye out for that. So like I said, we'll be around for another couple minutes to answer any other questions, so feel free to send them in. So we have another question come through. This one is from someone who's wondering how to get data on global and how to know that the viewer targets are what they are.
Hey Carla, great question. So that data that I have in that sheet, it does take a little bit of work getting. It's from Global. So they provide, the media outlets can provide what their audience profiles are to you if you're interested. So that information I received directly from Global.
We have another question. Is TrendKites free?
TrendKite is not free. So this is one that we're looking at potentially using because it is quite powerful in terms of measuring media impact. So right now it's they're helping us, they're providing us the data that we're asking for at no charge, but it's not free. They do have a not-for-profit rate. Another one is Meltwater Media. That one again is not free. So depending on what your budgets look like. Right now, what we've started with is just a very simple Google spreadsheet, like the one that I shared in my presentation. That works too.
Okay, and we have another question. This person's wondering about the media tracking program Trankite. Is that available to anyone and for free? So that's something that you just answered with before. And a question about the slideshow, if it's going to be available. Yes, it's going to be available on the TAL website. So we'll be sending out emails and social media posts once the slideshow is available. We have another question wondering if Anna would be able to share her spreadsheet for media tracking.
With all of the details, I could probably share with you some of the details not on it, but I'm certainly happy to share what that spreadsheet looks like to get you started. There's just some personal information on there that I don't have the permission from people to share publicly.
Yeah, so just the template is what they're looking for.
Oh, sure, Douglas. Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to share that.
Okay, and another question come through. What was the most difficult or challenging library story you've had to manage for media?
I think, well, I'll share a recent one. So recently I don't know if anybody has actually, which one shall I share? Give me 1 minute to think. You know what? This is a good media one. So George Takei. George Takei was here in 2017 as part of our Forward Thinking Speaker Series. So he at that time was our biggest speaker that we were bringing in. His event sold out. It was at the Shaw. We had over 1,700 people there. So and his event was in late fall. So what had happened was Hollywood Reporter published a story, and I remember this because it was Remembrance Day long weekend. They published the story the Friday night, stating that there was allegations against George Takei. There were allegations against him from a man who had met him. I think they had met in the 90s. It was a long time ago. So of course, there are our customers and the public were asking us to cancel the event because of these allegations. And we called his agent and George Takei, and he denied all of the allegations. He didn't even, he said he didn't remember them. And we had asked if we weren't going to cancel the event. And we had a relationship with one of the reporters from the Edmonton Journal and asked her to cover the event, just to provide, to cover the story. So she did, and I think there was an interview with George on there as well. At the event, we actually let people know ahead of time that he was going to address the allegations. So our key messages were This we won't be canceling the event. Mr. Takei will address the allegations during his presentation. And there is time for question and answer, so that if you have further questions for him, he'll be there to answer them. So these were the core messages that we held to leading up to the event. And then what happened was the event had already happened, but the allegations against him were dropped. So I think that was a tough one. I think we just had to make the decision of how we were going to move forward, and we stayed with it.
Okay, we're going to stick around for another 2 or 3 minutes to see if anyone else has any questions. So if you have anything, just send it through the questions or chat. And after that, that'll be the end of the webinar. Okay, another question. How important is it to have a brand for your library?
I think it's really important to have a brand for your library, so that when the public, the community thinks about your library, it's all of the things that you offer. I think there's been, like for EPL, for example, our brand changed, I think it was in 2010. If you remember, I would love to send these before and afters to everyone, actually, if you're interested. Our old logo, which is a part of your brand, it's not your brand. Our old logo was a Times New Roman logo. It had a stack of Navy books beside it. So if you thought of something like that was really boring and stodgy, it was that logo. So we wanted to share the vibrancy, the energy, and the diversity of our library. And that's what you can see with the colors coming in. And we use these colors in so many different ways in presentations. The colors aren't just static, they move and they're animated. I think also, as I mentioned in my presentations, it's important to bring your brand descriptions to life through your key messages. One of our taglines is spread the words. So when Pilar is writing a letter or she has a message in our annual report or business plan, she signs off with spread the words. So we make sure that our brand is a living and breathing thing in all that we do, so that when the public thinks about EPL or sees EPL, our brand personality, the energy, vibrancy, diversity comes to life with that.
I think you answered this a little bit, but can you just expand a bit more about how brand goes beyond a logo?
Sure. A logo is an identifier. So it's something that you see, like the Apple logo, for example, is an apple. The EPL logo is the bars, our colorful bars with EPL. So it's your signifier. The brand, it's part of your brand, whereas your brand is your personality. It's how people would describe you. So EPL is all of the things that I had just said. Apple, for example, their brand is innovative. It is trustworthy. It's advanced. So it's all of the things that you would use to describe that company that make up your brand.
Great, thanks for talking a bit about brands and logos. We'll stay on for one more minute to take any more questions. And if not, then that'll be the end of the webinar. Anna has said that you can feel free to email her if you have other questions regarding this topic. And like I said, this webinar was recorded, so we will be sharing it on the TAL website, and we'll be posting the actual presentation from Anna on the website as well, and it'll be going through social media. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up this webinar right now. Thank you for coming to learn about media relations with Anna, and we hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thanks. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.